afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PBA at Noon. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Sophie Caesar. We are very excited to have back Mark Appleby, President and CEO of Tartisan Nickel Corp, trading on the CSE under the symbol Tom Norman. Tartisan is a Canadian-based mineral exploration and mining development company, which owns the Kenbridge Nickel Project in northwestern Ontario. They recently announced the completion of the first 3 phases of their environmental baseline studies and the start of phase 4 to be conducted on the Kenbridge property. From where I'm sitting, it looks like Mark and his team are meticulously setting out to check all the boxes for investors. Here to update us is Mark Appleby. Welcome, Mark, and feel free to start whenever you want, and we'll have some questions for you at the end. Thanks, Mark.
Well, thank you, Paul and Sophie, for having me today. I'd just like to run you through our a brief presentation. If I can pull things up here. We're off to the races. So I think what we're going to try and do is very briefly in the next 10 minutes go through a few slides, and I'll provide some commentary as I go through, and then at the end feel free to do some Q&A. So Tartisan Nickel Corp, as Paul mentioned, is a Canadian-based battery metals exploration company. There's this natural disclaimer here. Our flagship is the Kenbridge Nickel Deposit, just located outside of Kenora in the Kenora Mining District off of the Trans-Canada Highway. It's basically classified as a small capex class 1 nickel sulfide project with a current mineral resource estimate of roughly 7.5 million tons, grading 0.62 nickel, 0.32 copper, and 1 million plus tons of inferred, grading over 1% nickel. So that equates to over 110 million pounds of nickel, 65 million pounds of copper. And in today's terms, that's roughly $1.7 billion worth of metals. We have currently a 4,100 odd hectare land position. We are upgrading an all-season access road into the project. The all-season road access is roughly a 13-kilometer bush road that 3/4 of it now has been converted to all access, and the remaining quarter will be converted in 2023. That's going to involve dynamiting, road widening, bushing, graveling, which will get us right to essentially where the 622-meter shaft is, and be able to allow us to bring in heavy equipment and fuel right to the project. Tartisan has several agreements in place, notably a First Nations agreement. So this is instrumental in going forward with the projects. I mean, it shows, for example, that we have established yet another baseline of community relations. We are a signatory to Treaty Number 3 and are actively engaged on a daily basis with the First Nations. As we go into the permitting phase, which is pre-feasibility in 2023, community relations will be of the utmost importance, as we'll have to get into a mine closure plan in the next advancement of the overall project. You can see some just basic infrastructure here, and more importantly, how there's not a lot of overburden in this area. While we are surrounded by some lakes, given that we're in an Ontario setting, you can see that we are at some elevation here. And today, this is a cleared out area with some new buildings on it, including a core shack, a utility shack, storage shack for vehicles, etc. The existing shaft is right here. That's a 622-meter shaft, goes down 2,050 odd feet, and arguably would, if you had to build that today, would be a $75 to $80 million venture. You can see massive sulfides exposed at surface, and an existing camp that's about 1 kilometer down a settle road here. We have been able to utilize this camp in terms of where we host and house our work crews and camp management. and obviously has been an instrumental early stage advantage. In a go forward mode, we will be able to utilize the road and essentially be driving in and out on a daily basis, or have another form of a camp, either right at where we're going to be building facilities, or potentially being able to continue to utilize the existing camp. Snapshot out of the PEA, which was put on CEDAR, announced July of 2022, but the full report going on CEDAR around Labor Day, envisions a 4.5 million ton resource with a 9-year project initial life. This equates to 500,000 tons per year, and basically 15 to 2,000 tons per day. The initial IRR pre-tax is 26%, with an NPV of roughly 182 million, after-tax MVP of 110 million. So with initial capital costs of 134 million, we feel that we're a low capex play, given our comparables in the sector, whom are arguably advertising $1.5 billion to $2 billion to go into some sort of production scenario, and arguably looking for higher metal prices in order to do so. XPS has done our metallurgical work in the past. This is a mineable, extractable deposit, and we are economic at today's metal prices. Of note, in the PEA, when it came out in last July, that does take into effect current supply chain issues and factored in inflation that we're all bearing witness to in today's world. Highly sensitive to the nickel price under the base case of $10, which is what the PEA was done at. We have an NPV again of 110 million and a payback period of 3.5 years after initial investment. Today we have $12 nickel, and the payback period moves to 3 years with an NPV after tax of roughly 187 million. And for those more bullish in the crowd, the payback period and IRR dramatically increase, IRR to 40%, with the payback period decreasing to 2.4 years. So we feel that this is a very investable plan, and while we are not getting a lot of credit for the PEA work that's been done, this is a point that's been seen throughout the sector and in the industry. But we feel that as we move into the pre-freeze phase, we will be starting to get incremental cents on the dollar for the value of in situ metals and for the infrastructure that's in place. So in our opinion, with a market cap of less than 20 million or thereabouts, there's certainly an argument to be made for accumulating shares at this point as we move into this PFS stage. The 9 bars on the left here in this graph represent the production profile. And again, open at depth and along strike. You can see here on the right side of the page, the green line representing the 2,050-foot shaft. Again, 3 compartment, 622 meters, mining it out in Lego-like fashion from top down to the base of the shaft in 5 different stages. You're just taking material, hoisting it to surface, and putting it through a processing facility at site where we would produce 2 concentrates. Arguably a $100 million facility. We feel that we've got the various people coming into place now to help us with the movement into pre-fees. Down the base of the shaft here, there'd be 2 crushing stations and ramping down into the mineralization that's there, and essentially just bringing it back to the crushing station and hoisting it to surface. What was drilled in 2021 was 10,700 odd meters. You can see the results on the screen and the drill holes that were in place. Certainly we encountered mineralization on these holes, and results of note, the deeper holes here of 1,000 plus meters encountered 3.18% nickel over a meter plus 1.15% nickel over 4 meters. And certainly there's lots of 0.82 and 0.7 over 3 meters roughly. One of the goals here in 2023 would bring the 1,000,000 tons of inferred, which arguably grades 1.47% in our PEA, and we want to bring that to the indicated category as part of the continuing route to de-risk this project. Again, envisions an underground mining situation in order to capitalize and utilize that modest CapEx. There is the ability to do a starter pit, but we didn't want to do that on day one because, as you can see here, the potential for it to cut into the shaft would essentially sort of negate that initial investment that was done by Falconbridge back in the 1950s and 60s. And we certainly want to be able to take advantage of that existing shaft that would cost so much to put in today. There is the thought that we could dewater the shaft in the coming year and actually drill from underground to better target and better get sort of a better jump on some of these holes as opposed to drilling them from surface. We do have a higher powered drill lined up for 2023, which will better allow us to target and utilize all the borehole geophysics that was done in the 2021 campaign. There are several targets, several conductors that have been seen and utilized and are part of the drilling program. Airborne MT will be done over the project entirety in 2023. This will help us identify new conductors on the property and better allow us to target certain anomalies at depth. This is seeming to be a new and improved technology that hasn't yet been utilized on many Canadian projects and seems to be coming into play. Also something that we'll be looking to use at our Still Lake project in the very near future. Where the base camp and where the existing shaft is here, center of the project. You can see the buoy footprints. Those are geophysical signatures. And 3 kilometers to the Kenbridge North here, which we call, you can also see similar geophysical anomalies. We are going to be doing geophysical work here in 2023 and look to drill these other 2 targets going forward. Preliminary budgets that were outlined in the PEA, roughly 7.8 million. You can see the various categories in $1 million pre-fees study. Several hundred thousands of dollars have already been utilized. We're calling for a minimum of 8,000 meter drill program in 2023 and various other things, including community relations, access road, and the continuing on of the baseline studies. We anticipate that we're going to need roughly $12 million in between now and the spring of 2024 to get us right through to feasibility. Next steps, continue on with the extensional exploratory drilling, bring this 1,000,000 tons of inferred into indicated, certainly continue along with the baseline environmental studies. This spring will mark full 4 cycles, or one full season of spring to spring, which will allow us to start triggering some of the permitting process. Have the LCs and access road phase 2 complete into the project and done, so a fuel truck can get brought in by the early autumn of 2023 and continue along with the community outreach. You can see essentially just corporately, we've got 114 million shares out, 127 million fully diluted. And while our share price is a few cents lower today, certainly a $20 million market cap is modest by any stretch of the imagination, given sort of even the overall breakup value of the company, $4 million worth of marketable securities and some cash. We are in need of some cash here to get in drilling in the spring. We are actively engaged in several more formal communications and sort of overall brokered sponsorship going forward potentially. Also have been considering somewhat upgrading, advancing to a more senior exchange, which is something we've been approached to do and considering. And with that, Paul and Sophie, I'll pass it back to you.
That I want to get to here. So you did mention the permitting process. Where are you with that, and how long is that going to take, and what does that look like?
So this spring will be a spring to spring in terms of seeing groundwater runoff and all the studies that have been done with regards to two springs, all the terrestrial, all the various other studies that have been done, the flora and fauna, et cetera. So a full report gets done, and the post this spring will allow us to advance into the permitting phase. So essentially, those baseline environmental studies actually do that as uh, as benign as they sound, and allow us to establish the baseline and get into the ministry and show them that what we want to build and do. So we figure that the spring marks one full year being into the process, and with 2 years to go. And so we determined that it was a 3-year process as of last spring. So we figure we've got 2 years of hard at it in terms of the permitting process, and continuing to de-risk and getting through the pre-fees and a feasibility study phase here.
So now, correct me if I'm wrong, but those, 2-3 years that you have, that's going to take you, that you need to do for the permitting, but that all lines up with, your plan to have shovels in the ground within 3 years.
Exactly right. With the various permitting, I mean, there's a myriad of things that need to occur, not the least of which is um, continuing to sort of de-risk the overall project through feasibility, but also getting various First Nations agreements in place with the mine closure plan, sorting out tailings. These are various permits and aspects that the ministry is already aware of with the Kenbridge project as a result of its dealings with Canadian Arrow Mines essentially a decade ago. So it's literally a matter of starting to freshen up the permits and moving the mining strategy along. And given that this is an underground mining operation, a great number of the tailings will be back down the shaft. And we do have an area already located for tailings. It's very unique and should be a plus for this project.
Excellent. So you did mention that, you're going to be looking at financing, and you already have some, groups that are interested. Are you available for any, government assistance? Because I believe nickel is a critical metal. Is there any, what is the government support in terms of that?
Yeah, so we've had preliminary discussions with the Ontario Ministry of Mines. They're certainly willing to assist if there are any hurdles, roadblocks in the permitting process. So as we go forward here with Night Peasel, Blue Heron, we're going to get some assistance there. We're also now on their critical metals list in terms of how they push our name forward to various potential investors. That's new and unique for us here, in only occurring in the last sort of 90 days. We are now approaching the federal government for potential infrastructure assistance as we sort of go from an exploration company to a development company. And therein lies sort of the twist and the leg up that will go forward here for investors as we kind of re-rate the company. It's a big deal to go from just purely exploration in the development phase through the FSFS.
So many questions, but I'll get to this. Are there any issues with environmentalists in the area? Like, who are your neighbors? What is the feeling in the area, the sentiment in the area?
So essentially, we're dealing with 7 different First Nations, 3 of which would have sort of that are contiguous, shall we say, to the land package and that we've been working with. So with all the road permitting that's had to occur, we've actually had to get sign-offs from the First Nations, which allows us to take trees, do the road winding, the ditching, other things, blasting that's occurring on the road. So There have been no issues to date, knock on wood. We are sort of in best practices mode and doing everything we can to work sort of one-on-one and with the First Nations as we go forward and deal with any potential issues that come up. So everyone's happy here.
Okay, excellent. And then I guess a question that came up more than once is there any other mineral or metals on the property than nickel?
Yeah, so whatever we have in nickel, there's half thereof in copper. So we actually look at this as a nickel copper deposit where two concentrates would actually be made here at the Kenbridge project. There are some cobalt as well, but it's sort of minor credits, and we probably wouldn't get very much value at the smelter. There are some gold anomalies on the project as well that we're going to have a look at here in 2023, which have shown up on a couple of surveys that we've done, airborne surveys. So that's going to be sort of some basic groundwork here in the summer of 2023 to go and have a look at those.
And so any platinum?
Only minor showings that we would, if we got credits, it would only be nominal credits at this point.
Okay. And so I mean, your plan, shovels in the ground in 3 years. Is the plan to move to production then? Is that, are you set on doing that? Or if it wasn't shareholders' benefit, you'd be willing to, bring in a JV or potentially an M&A?
Yeah, you can appreciate that we've had multiple calls from various sectors, certainly through the automotive to folks that are looking for concentrates and feed for their mills. So we're open to discussion with all possibilities, but certainly it's kind of head down, chin up here, and moving towards this PFS stage right now, and get shovels in the ground here, become part of the supply chain in the province of Ontario.
Excellent. So just for people on the call who may not know, could you briefly explain what a pre-feasibility is and the cost?
Yeah, so it's always a good question. We believe that the cost of pre-fees into fees is encompassed within this overall $12 million budget.
Excellent.
And part of what happens in pre-feasibility is identifying those factors that would help mitigate risk in the overall project and help to allow potential investors to come in and feel comfortable with investing in the Kenbridge deposit. So, part of those things that are involved essentially is a $4 million drill program, which would allow for more definition drilling in between drill holes, so to speak, to allow us to be able to bring the 1 million tons of the 1.47 inferred into the indicated category. A big piece of that is $1 million worth of these baseline environmental studies, which we triggered the timeline in the spring of 2022 to help us sort of not only mitigate the timeline. And sorry, I'm doing the shakes here.
Okay. You could just restart your camera. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. To mitigate the timeline, but also that would have been a factor within the PFS stage. So we feel like we've already started a number of those important boxes being ticked and got a jump start on pre-feasibility. Sort of the longer answer here as well is that we're now in discussions with various people to do the fees, and not only as an academic study, but also to help us build out the project.
Excellent. So Paul, do you have there we go. I'm sure Paul had a couple of questions for you as well.
The US government has put together large programs to help strategic metal companies, move forward. There's also been articles out there that they would support Canadian companies. Have you had any talks with the American government, or is that in your pipeline of things to do or things to check out?
Well, there's the one notion that the minister, the Department of Finance would basically fund feasibility studies. So again, we need to recategorize Tartisan to bring us out of this sort of exploration mode and get us into this PFS mode. And it's for those types of studies that some of these larger dollars would look towards. So just not grassroots exploration, but uh, being able for them to have, bring us into the supply chain effectively. So yes, no stone unturned here at Tartisan. There will be some discussions had, and we have reached out to several different entities.
Okay. Do you have any institutional coverage or brokerage coverage?
Fundamental Research Corp did put a recommendation out on us last July, 2022. We were trading sort of high 20s at the time, and they had an 85 cent price target. Collier Capital just put out a little research piece on us as well with an initial 46 cent price target. So yeah, I guess institutionally, that's where we're at. There are some brokers here based out of Toronto that are looking at now following the company and looking to do a broker deal with Tartisan. So sort of look for that to come, hopefully in your near future.
You mentioned earlier in your when you were talking about uplisting, are you meaning getting off the CSE, going to the TSX, the big board, basically?
Yeah, we
Or
were
US?
approached by the TSX, the big board, to consider us moving to the most senior exchange, as we do qualify. That in combination with some funding, and obviously we'd like to actually trade at a value that represents our overall enterprise value. I think we would obtain greater exposure to liquidity, and there's also the potential to join the base metals index that's there.
Yeah,
Certainly, it's something that I think is on our wish list in the future. Maybe that's a late 2023 situation, early 2024. But you have to then sort of step up your reporting in terms of timing and timeliness, and obviously best practices. But I think it's sort of a welcome and another box ticked in terms of the de-risking of the overall company.
gotcha. And one final question, Mark. I'm sure you touched on it briefly, that you have offtake agreements, or you've had discussions with people that would be offtake agreements. I'm assuming that's major car manufacturers, because they're always all looking for it.
Yeah, there is a current offtake agreement with Glencore at commercial terms. It doesn't mean that we can't invite competition, and certainly their competitors have contacted us, looking at the mining strategy and sort of timing thereof. They obviously are looking for concentrates and feed, so this is something, well, early days. Another welcome advancement in the PFS allows greater investability by more senior companies into the deal.
No, 100%, 100%.
So Mark, this has all been fantastic and it's great news. But going forward, what can investors like? What are the next milestones and catalysts that we can expect in terms of news from you?
Yeah, well, I think some basic news would come out in terms of corporate updates on the company, where we're at with the road and the timing thereof, the 2023 exploration program, the announcement and timing, and then the results of the baseline studies and the start of the permitting process. I think those are all sort of near-term catalysts that people will have to look forward to with Tartisan Nickel Corp.
Excellent. And will we be seeing you at PDAC this year in Toronto?
Definitely been approached for multiple one-on-one meetings. So getting the dance card signed up. And if anyone would certainly like to meet on a one-on-one basis, let's map out some time and try and make that happen.
Excellent. That's great news.
Mark, thanks so much for today. Very much appreciated for the update. You've got a great story going. It's moving forward. You've got everything in place. So let's just keep the news coming, and we'll keep our shareholders and everybody updated.
We look
Well,
forward
thank you,
to
Paul and Sophie, for hosting, and thank you, viewing audience. Look forward to speaking with you again.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much.